This is the part of the service where if I were not sick and were there and had passed out the readings to female voices, that would be happening. Instead, you get my sort of male voice. This is from Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg. She writes, once again, I'm going to do that thing wherein I work mostly with the Hebrew transliteration of words, aka just writing the words with English letters, rather than translations, because the translations are insufficient. Tuma and its twin Tahara are states of being. Are they spiritual statuses of infection or contagion that exist sort of on the ritual energetic realm? We don't really know. Tuma is generally in the Torah and beyond translated as ritual impurity, and Tahara is generally translated as ritual purity. The main problem with this translation is the moralistic connotation that goes with it, that there's a judgment attached. It's also difficult to know how we should read these two states in terms of preferability. For example, are we to assume that being tameh is good and being tahor is, tameh is bad and tahor is good, or that being tameh is regular life and being tahor is saved for really special holy times? Rabbi Ruttenberg finishes by giving a shout out to Lisa Berman, who was education director at the Mikveh Mayim Hayim, who gave her the gift of translating Tuma as everyday state and Tahara as elevated state, which makes a lot more sense. And then Rabbi Ruttenberg quotes Rabbi Dr. Rachel Adler in our second reading. Rabbi Dr. Adler writes, Tuma is the result of our confrontation with the fact of our own mortality. It is the going down into darkness. Tahara is the result of our reaffirmation of our own immortality. It is the re-entry into light. Tuma is devil or frightening only when there is no further life. Otherwise, Tuma is simply part of the human cycle. To be tameh is not wrong or bad. Often it is necessary, and sometimes it is mandatory. End quote. So, how many of us heard that the Pope repudiated the doctrine of discovery this last Thursday? Anybody? I can't see what there. I'm assuming there are some hands. How many of us have attended a Passover Seder at least once in our life? I know there are more hands up there. Now, how many of us have seen at least one of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies? Probably more of us. If you've seen some of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the DC Extended Universe, you'll know about origin stories. It's how often it's mostly about a superhero, but sometimes it's a supervillain and how they became who they are. So Peter Parker, normal nerd boy, was bitten by a radioactive spider and became Spider-Man. Amazonian Princess Diana of Themyscira is known to the world as Wonder Woman. Origin stories are often told in our own lives and in our families. The stories that we retell at holidays and how people met and what interesting things happened to bring us to where we are today. A Passover Seder is basically a very finely crafted origin story of the Jewish peoples, which includes their special relationship with their God. And unlike movies, which only have sight and sound, a Seder meal includes taste and smell and texture. It has been crafted over thousands of years to make it really much more memorable, to lock in with all those different senses. And they have found ways over the years to involve children so that the kids pay more attention and learn more of the story earlier. And, if you have a cool treasure hunt to keep the kids interested at the end, that only brings more attention to it, and at least is an easier way to bribe them to come when you are modern parents. This Wednesday evening at sunset, Passover begins. Many of our observant Jewish cousins will have a Passover Seder that night or the next, and it emphasizes the important parts of Jewish identity. By telling this story over and over for literally thousands of years, that creates that sense of a common identity. And it provides a cultural experience to gather and connect with each other, even for those who aren't especially religious. Seder's not... Yes. So Seders are the origin story of the Jewish peoples, but that's not the full definition of Jewish identity. Living in the desert thousands of years ago with no refrigeration and lots of enemies, while trying to please a deity which self-identifies as being a jealous God, there are going to be lots of rules to follow to keep you all safe and whole. The Talmud tells us that there are 613 commandments in the Tanakh, 248 positive commandments and 365 negative commandments. Now, the Talmud does not provide an extensive list of all 613, which has given Jewish scholars many, many interesting afternoons arguing over this particular thing. Should it be its own independent commandment, or is it better included in other commandments? You thought we liked to argue and debate. And I'm not here to talk about the specifics of those 613. I'm not here to talk about the content of those commandments, nor how those commandments have been used by some groups of humans to condemn or demonize other humans. I'm here to point out that they exist. And as Rabbi Ruttenberg was talking about, some of them had to do with purity. Sometimes it's about health. If you've just touched a dead body 2,000 years ago, you may well have contracted the disease that killed that dead body. You want to be known as impure at that point, and you want some rituals to purify yourself and keep your community healthy and clean. And sometimes you just want to be pure enough to perform some ritual on behalf of yourself or your family or for the whole group. So there's lots of different ways that you can be pure or impure, or thanks to Rabbi Ruttenberg and Rabbi Dr. Adler, rather than using the words purity and impurity, maybe using the idea of regular life and exalted life, extra special life. I think that's really, really helpful for those of us who are alive right now. And there have been thousands of years of people for whom Tuma has been seen as wrong or bad. And as the kids today say, that's going to leave a mark. That considering ourselves as impure, that does make us, gives us a complex, shall we say. Now, this is not something that is only a Jewish condition. You may have heard of the whole concept of original sin, which Augustine created in the 4th century CE. And, I think, again, the idea is that they're trying to find a way to explain the world and to make us feel better about our place in it. And that, well, God is so powerful that he can even heal and make whole again those of us humans who have original sin. We're completely tainted. There's no way that we can help ourselves, but God can, because he is so powerful. Well, that may have helped for Augustine, lecherous old thief that he was, but it again gave rise to 1,500 years of people thinking that they have original sin and are wrong and bad. And that's not good for us, nor for the communities that we create. It leaves a mark in our own psyches and in our world. And one way it shows up in the world, the Pope used this concept of original sin and applied it to indigenous peoples, in this case, in the Americas, we'll say. And so when Europeans came to these shores and they found other human beings but were not Christian, well, then they're going to go to hell for eternity. Anything we do to them to make them believe the stuff we believe is actually saving an immortal soul. And so, if we steal their lands and their kids and torture a few of them, really, we're doing them a favor. This is all nonsense. I'm sure you all understand, but that was the law for a very long time. And really, the Pope just repudiated that 3 days ago. This is Sunday. 3 days ago. Some of the laws in our United States Constitution still rely on the doctrine of discovery. It leaves a mark, this idea that we're impure and that all of us are impure, and therefore we can create these laws because everybody's ill. That's the worldwide effects of things. Now, it also has a much more personal. We go from the macro to the micro. Most of us know Carrie Fisher. She starred as Princess Leia. She passed away in 2016. Just before she passed away, she had published her 3rd memoir, The Princess Diarist. And she took that from her diaries as a young woman. And so that she writes, at the ripe old age of 18 months, I lost my father to an adulteress. I knew in my heart that the only rationale he could have had for leaving was because of how big a disappointment I must have been. Wow. And in my talks with my therapist, his explanation of this is that for most human beings, for most little kids, it is more scary to imagine that the world is chaotic than it is to imagine that we have control, but we're being punished because we are bad or wrong. And so most kids assume, oh, we do have control, we're just being punished. Our lives are imperfect because of something we did. And we build these assumptions into our own lives, and we build them into our religions and our nation's charters and legal systems. It's such a mess. Becky is a physical therapist, and she talks about this fascinating study of accident survivors. And people who were in accidents but who were at fault actually heal better than do those who did everything right and still had an accident. And in this case, heal better means more quickly, more completely, with fewer long-term complications. If you caused the accident, if you were drunk or on drugs or fell asleep at the wheel or whatever, you can tell yourself, I can choose to do that differently in the future. Therefore, I have more control over my world. You're going to heal better. If you were an innocent survivor of someone just making a mistake, now your body mind is worried about something happening at any time, no matter how prepared you are, no matter if you're innocent or guilty or somehow deserve it. And that makes us less comfortable. It makes us more anxious, and it causes our healing to take longer. Our brains crave the illusion that we need control so badly that we trade self-condemnation for control. Interestingly enough, our brains also have this negativity bias, which, after all, has kept us alive for tens of thousands of years. Our brain pays more attention to negative things than to positive things. And so we really focus on the negative, and we sometimes dismiss outright anything that happened in a positive way. I do not think I'm the only person here whose therapist has pointed out that behaviors which once helped us are now causing us more harm than good. This is where Unitarian Universalism's theology is as radical now as it was 300 years ago and can provide the answer to these conundrums. How do we train ourselves to notice the positives in the world, to live without control, to live in ambiguity, and to accept grace as much as evil in the world? Our Unitarian Universalist Association first principle is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. This is not just a bumper sticker or a debate point to have with family and friends. It's a significant saving message. It is our true gift to the world, but we sometimes don't notice how deep it is. Inherent worth and dignity is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's not an opportunity to feel smug and self-satisfied. It's not an award, it's an assignment. Our inherent worth and dignity is an invitation to notice how complex and often self-defeating our psychological behaviors can be, and a charge to rewire our body minds by doing the work to truly feel and embody our inherent worth, and to help cultivate it in others. I talk a lot about each of us being a beacon to other human beings. This is how we do it, not as smug or as assertive egoists, but as courageously compassionate, quietly dignified fellow travelers who know that they have inherent worth, and they know everyone around them has inherent worth, and treat them that way. And now, welcoming Alex and Julia and Greg and Ian, and eventually Karen, now we have more members to help remind each other and to serve as beacons to still more of our dear human cousins who need our saving message. So may we be.